if you can, when you find common ground and you start speaking with someone, you're going to know who they are. And then you're going to know, based on your own style, how to adapt your conversation so that they will receive the information in the way they want to receive it.
Welcome to the Medical Sales Accelerator Podcast. I'm your host, Zed Williamson. I want you to think about operating in business today, but choosing not to use the internet or not to use email. Just saying, nah, that's not really going to be helpful. You could do that by just traveling back to the mid-90s. Now, what's interesting is that seems insane. However, there are many medical device companies that are doing their training like it is the mid-90s. And that's why we're speaking with our guest today, Gerry Savage. He is the founder of 4 Pillars Consulting Group, author of the 4 Pillars of Sales, and The Janitor. Gerry, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Zed. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So hopefully I poked people in the rib a little bit about the current training, and that sometimes it feels like it's 1994. What does that mean to you, the difference of that training compared to where maybe we should be?
Yeah, I think it's looking at things in a vacuum. I think the larger med device companies, and I'm not speaking about all of them because I don't have that specific knowledge, but medical device reps will go in and they'll get product training from product managers, right? The entire week of a sales training program, and then they'll do a role play, which is uncomfortable and everybody doesn't like towards the end. And for young sales reps who haven't had the opportunity to be out in the field yet, it's feature benefit, and they learn their product and they so well, and they've got all this product knowledge, but then they stumble when it comes to communicating with their clients or potential prospects. And that's where the beginning of why so many sales reps fail in the first year.
Yeah. It's funny. This may be a horrible reference to make, but what I just imagined when you walked through that is there was a movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger called Total Recall, and he's trying to travel to Mars, and he's wearing this costume of an older woman, right? And the security guard says, "How long are you going to go?" And she says 3 weeks. And then he asks another question, and the only answer that machine has is 3 weeks, 3 weeks. And that's what I imagine that we're training in that scenario, is where here's this great clinical knowledge, but we haven't trained you to have a deep trust building conversation. We've only trained you to say 3 weeks. So we better hope that the question is the right question. And I'm not a big fan of leaving things up to hope.
No, and neither am I. And it reminds me. Several years ago, I went to speak to a trauma training class at one of the device companies, and at that time, the company was putting a lot of graduate students, they were in engineering students, just out of college. They thought that was a great way to go, and put them into distributorships and be trained as device reps. And I went in to speak to these folks, and they were all great, and they were really intelligent kids, right? And and then I saw some of them in the field afterwards, and they were great within their peer groups. But when they started speaking to an orthopedic surgeon or somebody, that they had to go, talk to about a product, they just fell down because they didn't know how to find common ground. And in the 4 Pillars of Sales, which I based on 4 pillars: honesty, integrity, knowledge, and genuine interest in people, I try to instill that the genuine interest in people is a pathway to a successful life and a fulfilling life and a successful career. And why is that? It's because when you find common ground with someone, you can have a conversation. I think so many sales programs, and we spoke about, the way medical device companies train people, but the same way with a lot of sales training companies, they teach you a process, and everybody thinks they have to follow a process, and you become robotic. You become like the machine that you just mentioned in the Schwarzenegger movie. And so what I've tried to do, and I think is really important, and I wasn't always great at it, but I became a student of it because I got frustrated myself. And I found that if I found common ground with someone, I could have a conversation. And then there's no interview. I'm not interviewing you to talk to find out what I'm going to sell you, because I can't be the decider on that. I can't sell you anything. I have to find out obviously what it is that, we need to solve together. And when you find common ground, you can have a discussion, and then they begin to trust you. And through trust, the conversation opens, and then you can find out, an issue, uncover a need that maybe they didn't even know they had. But you can't do that unless you can't do that by walking in with your bag, or even if it's different today, obviously, because we've changed the way we've sold, but it still has to be about building relationships. And if you're just handing a product to someone at a meeting and you're putting it in their hands, first of all, you lose control. But secondly, you have no basis for anything to build. There's no reason for that person to continue speaking with you.
Yeah. You know, these things make sense, and they're not magic. Focusing on the common ground, what you're doing is you're actually connecting with that person at an emotional level. And I know sometimes people hear the word emotional and they think like your arms around each other and you're crying about something. That's not what I mean. I mean, you're connecting on something that has feeling. And the importance of that is there's a part of our brain called the reticular activating system.
Right?
And it is, if you imagine going to a nightclub and there's a bouncer outside, that's the reticular activating system. And the bouncer does not let a lot in. Your brain is a fancy nightclub. I want you to think about it that way. And when you connect emotionally, that puts your name on the list. And building common ground, that's what you're doing. You're purposely letting the person get access to your wisdom and knowledge, where if you don't do that, you're just spraying, a water gun on a forest fire.
Yeah, I did. You're absolutely right about that. And there's one other thing that's really important that lets you do. When you find common ground with someone, it's easy to understand how they like to receive information. So, like I built a personality assessment for the 4 pillars. Now, I'm sure we've both, looked at Myers-Briggs and all the,
Yep.
the tons of them that are out there. I wanted to build one that was easy for sales associates to use, because all of that is all that intellectual property is out there now, and you can use it. So I built 4 characters: the dominator, the enthusiast, the analyst, and the moderator, and said, this is their personality style. Here are the behavioral traits. And when you find common ground and you start speaking with someone, you're going to know who they are. And then you're going to know, based on your own style, how to adapt your conversation so that they will receive the information in the way they want to receive it. In other words, if I'm a dominator and I'm like this driven, like this salesperson that's walking in and, I'm going to feature benefit you to death with my product. And you happen to be a moderator, which is kind of like, I like you, you like me, that type of person. And I may not like your product. I'm not going to tell you that, but when you leave, if you're a dominator and you're mowing over the top of me, then I'm going to tell my administrative assistant that I don't need to see you anymore.
Right.
So, if you find common ground with someone and you are really present in the moment, and that's what we need to do, because you're absolutely right. And we do make decisions. We make our decisions based on emotion first. So if somebody emotionally looks at me and they say, okay, well, I trust Gerry, he's speaking to me in my language, now you can further that conversation. That's the only way you're going to uncover the actual need or issue. And then that's the only way that relationship begins to flourish. And, whether you get a sale then or not, you build a relationship, and eventually that comes back to you tenfold. That's how I've always processed it. But it's really important to understand what somebody's personality style is. And that's another thing that the major companies do. They put the disc out there, they put insights, profiles out there, and everybody says, oh, I'm a red, I'm a blue, and they go, yeah, look at me. And I'm like, but they never show them how to use it. And I'm not talking about using this stuff to put someone over on somebody. Communication is king. And if you can't communicate effectively, and I have a course on my website, and I'm actually doing a seminar tomorrow night, which is based on effective communication in a sales call. And it's based on, knowing what your personality style, knowing what the personality style is of the person that you're speaking with, so that you can build a relationship. And if I'm the owner of a company, I'm thinking, if I've got salespeople out there that are actually building relationships and not just doing one-off sales, or making the milk runs to the only the customers that like them, then wow, we're going to do a whole lot better this year, you know.
Absolutely. Well, and it's even, for the person out there, I like to try to think from a cynic's perspective of someone listening to this, and the yeah buts or the yeah rights. And
Hmm.
what these things can feel like is they can feel like they're slow in the beginning. Like, I gotta get out there. I gotta make calls. And if I do enough, it's a numbers game. And what I would say to that is, if we do understand our communication style or personality style, and we understand the person we're talking to, what we're doing is we're removing threat. And I like to trick myself by, you know, calling my behavior purposeful in the negative. So let me back that up. So someone who doesn't want to focus on this, what you're doing is you're doing the best thing you can to create threat in your interaction. So if you want to create threat between you and your customer, then don't pay attention to personality or communication.
Yeah,
And it
that's
just kind of makes
powerful.
it stick a little bit, right? Because
Hmm.
it does make so much sense.
Yeah, that's really powerful. The other thing that happens with that too is, you're always going to run into some type of an objection in a meeting or a call, right? Whether it's a team and you're having a meeting and there's, your conflict's going to come up, and a sales call, an objection is going to come up, right? And if you walk into a meeting, and like a physician is famous for saying this at a me, or what do you got for me? And you go, oh, and you panic and you pull something out and you start talking, and then you haven't done anything that we've just discussed, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So what happens is that an objection comes up. You can't overcome the objection. The reason you can't overcome the objection is because you haven't built that trust. You haven't built any relationship. You haven't. I will steal something from Ron Willingham, who wrote Integrity Selling, and I love this. I've used it for years. He said, "Sales is something you do for and with someone, not to someone." So if I found common ground and I've had a discussion, and that person begins to trust me, and then we start talking about what those particular needs are, or what might benefit or solve a problem, and we get to a point, well, I don't know, whatever. Okay, so to revalidate what you've done, or to go back and reaffirm that you found the right thing, um, it can only happen if that person now trusts you. If they don't, the meeting ends. The meeting ends. Oh, I'll think about it. And then you go out and you say, oh, I had a great call. Yeah, he's going
yeah.
to think about it, or she's going to
Yeah, I
think
got a
about it.
pending. Yeah,
Yeah, never going to happen. Or, but if you've done everything right and they say, well, let me think about this, I really need to discuss it with my partners, let's say, okay, that's okay. That's a lot different than, well, let me think about it and I'll get back to you, right? It means that you haven't done everything that you needed to do. So that person, you talked about threat, right? So if you remove that threat, that emotional tie begins to build, because they actually like you, because you're speaking to them in terms that they like to receive information based on their style. The whole picture changes. And I think what the other thing that happens with that is that, especially with newer or younger salespeople, is, and I think anybody listening, we've all heard this, is that, we hate silence, right? So we'll pick up that space in between there and fill it, because we don't like the silence. And that's a problem, because, you absolutely need to have that uncomfortable feeling, and, if it is to some people, because in that, you there's a chance for the whole conversation to begin to take shape and resonate. And if you're just filling the gaps all the time, you're going to miss things.
yeah. You're gonna not only are you gonna miss things, you're going to answer a question that was never asked, and the person will put your answer on a new question. And so you don't even get to control the perspective or
Right.
context in which you inform somebody.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And one of the things I always used to do when I was a younger salesperson is I programmed myself to stop before I ever went in an office, or if I ever got on a call, and I said, okay, what's my outcome? What do I want to happen here? Whether that's another meeting, whether that's the end, the sale, the end, the byproduct is the sale. What's Because you got to have a roadmap. Again, not to put one over on anyone. The roadmap, actually, if you have a roadmap, everybody's going to be appreciative of that because you're valuing people's time to begin with. I look at it that way. So what's my outcome? Okay, I want to speak about this and I want to do this. And by the time I'm at the end of the meeting, I'm going to ask about this. Because if somebody ends the meeting for you, you've already gone 5 minutes too long.
Mm-hmm.
And so you always got to have that roadmap. And inside of that roadmap that you're following comes that discussion and comes the being present enough to understand their style and walking through that. That's all encapsulated in that.
I'm curious, if we look at the four pillars and we look at a behavior, maybe on let's talk about a rep who's maybe with a new organization, younger in their career, maybe, and call reluctance pops up with that person. What are some tools someone can use when they start recognizing this behavior within themselves?
Yeah. So, and I'm going to speak from experience because I've experienced it. Um, I was in the Marine Corps several years ago, and I always go back to this story in my mind. I was on a force march, and I was happened to be pretty sick that day, and I wanted to quit. Right? No, make no bones about it. And there was a Sergeant Hodges, who basically walked with me. The force march, if you know, is a full pack rifle helmet, and you're just walking like in huge steps, And this was like a 10-mile march, and it was hot as could be. And I tell this because I go back in my mind and I think about that and I live it, and I want it, but I didn't quit, right? And I think about that, and I put that into context and related to whatever I was doing or trying to accomplish that day. Or so if there's a mountain in front of me, right? I'm like, well, I did that, so this is nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we have to relate. So we all have those things in our life. So for younger salespeople, that might have been student athletes that I guarantee we've all had successes in our lives growing up. And we have to relate those because that just builds the belief in ourselves because we forget those things. We're deletion creatures, let's face it. And we forget those things and we let the other things, the other failures kind of mount up and cover those good things. Well, you have to bring those things to the surface. And once you bring those things to the surface, you can say, okay, I can do that. And then once you do that, it becomes easier and easier and easier because at that point, success breeds success. Because then once you get over that hump and you go make the next call and the next call, and you should, if you've had a successful call and you've got over one that's really difficult to do, the next thing you should do is go make another one and go make another one. And that's what happens. Some people go, okay, I got over that good. I can sit down and I can wait. No, 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 no. Now you've got to flex that muscle and you've got to build that muscle. And so that's just one thing that I would do. You can talk yourself into not making a sales call or doing busy work. And I think the danger, and you talk about a lot of people that are companies that they don't see a lot of growth from their salespeople over a period of time. I'm not so sure I love the word farmer versus hunter, um, because you have people that are just sitting on their business and maybe they get growth through their current accounts, but they don't get new business. And why is that? If you delve a little deeper into it, probably because they're so comfortable that they have call reluctance built in. They're not going to go see that new account.
Right.
And I think one of the ways that you get over that is say, okay, well, what did I do to build this account? Wow, it was really tough. So if I'm a sales manager And I know I've got somebody that did a lot of work a couple of years ago to build this account, and they're not going out to get new accounts. I'm going to sit down, and part of my conversation with them is tell me something. What did you do when you first started calling on this account? Well, what was the most difficult thing you did? Well, how did you overcome that? Oh, well, that's what you need to do now. And you've done it before. So I've got faith in you that you can do that. And don't worry if you're going to fail, you just get back up. The only way you can fail is if you stop. So don't stop. I
Yeah.
don't know if that helps, but
No,
that's
absolutely. It's powerful because, our brain is always seeking whatever we define as comfort. And, it stacks on top of itself. So it's going to forget the past wins. It's going to put more focus on the future pains, and it's going to put you in avoidance.
exactly
And
right. Yeah.
that's why you can come up with a million logical reasons why you shouldn't do the thing you don't want to do. You
Yeah.
know? And at the same time, if you were to be sitting at a hotel or airport bar next to a stranger that was in sales, and that stranger asked your opinion about what they should do about their call reluctance, you would tell them, you just got to get over it. It's because it's so easy, right? When we're not connected to it. And I love bringing in a personal story. This is not as powerful as what you did. There was a time when I was managing a sales team, and our offices were in downtown New Orleans. And anytime anybody started complaining, what we do is we'd cancel meetings and take a tour through the World War II Museum, because I was trying to do the same thing. Like, come on, really?
Yeah.
We're calling this tough. We're calling this difficult. Like, we can say it's hard, but let's put some context around how we spend our lives and what it is that we're assigning difficulty to.
Hmm. Yeah, I like that. That was insightful to do that. And I think, it's we don't think that's thinking out of the box, right? You were thinking a little bit out of the, how can I get these guys to and these women to do what they need to do? We gotta get going here. What can I do? Well, here's the thing. You gotta almost put yourself in that place though. You gotta be able to feel almost what it was like to be
Yep.
there in order to feel that pain. Now, um, years ago, I was listening to a Tony Robbins CD back then in the car. I remember this,
Mhm.
and I actually loved this interpretation, and because I don't, not that I buy everything that he says and the heart pounding stuff that comes out of it, but this was really good, and I don't know where he got this from, but he got it from somewhere. It was called the Dickens approach. So, in other words, we all know Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol
Mhm.
and the Visit from the Three Ghosts. And I often joke, you need a visit from the three ghosts or what. Um, but it was like putting yourself in a movie almost in your mind that says, okay, 5 years from now, if I do this, this, and this, what's that going to look like? And what am I going to have? And what's that going to mean for my family? And what am I going to be enjoying? Does that put me towards financial freedom? And what am I going to do? All right. So you put yourself in there. How does that make you feel? Oh, I'm going to be out there. I'm going to be traveling 3 times a year. I'm going to be doing, and then you say, okay, now what happens if you don't do that? And let's say you get fired from your job, or let's say that you never make any more money. And let's say that you're not able to save what you want to do. And what does that do to your family? I'm just making stuff up as I'm going along here. But you internalize that and you make it, and almost to the point where he does it in a goal setting exercise, I think, years ago. This was years ago. But if you sit there and you start internalizing that and it makes you feel that way, and you go, holy shit, I don't want to be that way, you know? I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of
It's
ways
power there.
to get yourself out of that that negative realm. And for salespeople, call reluctance is one of the I think is one of the I wrote about it in the four pillars too, is one of the major reasons for for failure and people getting out of the business and doing something else that potentially could have done better, you know?
Yeah. Well,
I don't know if you've experienced when you were running your sales teams, if you've experienced a similar thing, but
oh, absolutely. Yeah. Before we started recording, you had mentioned to me that, this high percentage, I think it was 35% of salespeople fail first year. And there's no part of me that believes that that's because they couldn't do it. Right. So I really appreciate the work you're doing at the Four Pillars Consulting Group. I would recommend to the audience, read the books. I know this audience loves reading. They love absorbing. And then also, you're okay if people reach out directly to you through LinkedIn if they want to chat about more things with you.
oh yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to have a conversation with anyone. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. It's Gerry Savage with a G. I also have a website. It's called fourpillarsconsultinggroup.com. On that, you'll actually find a course. It's called Effective Communication in a Sales Call. There's another one coming sometime in the next few weeks, which is based on the beginning of the book, which is the sales process, and it talks about that belief in self that we talked about, and that alignment. And then I build the sales process into that, which catches up with the second course, which is that effective communication and a sales call. And it's really understanding personality styles and how to adapt your style to communicate effectively and build relationships. And that's what it is. I mean, I think the four pillars are all about character, honesty, integrity, knowledge, and genuine interest. I think you have to be honest with yourself before you can be honest with anyone else, right?
Yep.
Integrity is not just doing the right thing when no one's looking. It's doing those hard things in spite of the fact that they're hard.
Yep.
And knowledge is, you mentioned your audience loves to read. Being a lifelong learner, there's no substitute for it. Picking up something every day. Um, I just released another publication too, not another book, but I released the Four Pillar Success Journal, where I put a quote in there at the beginning of every week. And at the beginning of every month, there's a paragraph. And what I hope people will do with that is when they go in and write, journaling is a big thing, I think is important. If you write down your thoughts, you're more likely to do them if you write them down because you're holding yourself accountable. That's
Yep.
another reason. But in that, I put my three non-negotiables every morning. What are my three non-negotiables? I want to read, I want to write, I want to exercise. And when I'm reading, what am I reading? For me, I'm reading some scripture. I'm reading a quote. I'm reading something from a book. I was actually reading from Northhouse's book this morning before we spoke, so on leadership. So
No, it's really good. And what I'd love people to take away is what you're putting forth is a recipe that, when executed, produces a repeatable outcome. I mean, that's the cool thing about recipes is there can be a brilliant chef that comes up with an amazing dish, and there's a recipe for that dish now that someone else can go and take and learn from. You didn't need necessarily the wisdom that created the recipe, but now that you have the recipe, you can execute it. And I think sometimes people talk themselves into thinking luck, timing, bad luck, bad timing. And what I really like about your work is it is a recipe. Follow it and you'll get a expected repeatable outcome. And so we'll put those links in the show notes for easy access to people, the website, the LinkedIn, and links to the books.
Well, I really appreciate that. So I would like to say one more thing about the four pillars. I find things tend to get canned. I think sales process is just the word process. You got to follow these steps. And what I tried to instill in people with the four pillars is, it's that recipe you spoke about, but you can change a little bit in that dish as you go along to your liking and how you like to eat, how you like to receive it. And so it's not a canned process, right? It's understanding how to communicate and building relationships. And that in itself, if you follow those guidelines, then you'll be more successful. But it's not like here I'm coming into your office and the feature benefits you to death. First, I want to understand who you are. I want to get to know you. I want to build that rapport by finding common ground so that together we can make a decision on what you need. Not me. You make that decision. I'm going to help you as your partner.
Right.
And we remove those threats that you talked about at that point.
That's great. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time and spending it with our audience. We'll get those links in the show notes, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.
You too. It's my pleasure. I really enjoyed speaking with you.
Thanks. You too.
Take care.